Hey everyone, Geophysicist Stefan Burns here. Shalom Alaikum. Breaking news, a magnitude 5.4 earthquake has struck directly here, the western side of the Sinai microplate, and this was a extensional earthquake as a result of rifting pushing up from the south here that struck the Suez Canal, a very important geopolitical point. And there's been some recent activity at Campi Flegrei in Italy, Europe's supervolcano, really the big supervolcano in Europe, with the strongest ever reported earthquake at magnitude 4.7. And you have a total solar eclipse passing directly south. Earthquake, this epicenter, exactly next year on August 2nd of 2027. So here we have a 5% chance of a foreshock already for a magnitude 6.5 or greater event. This could probably top out around magnitude 7.1 or 7.2 based on the geologic rifting dynamics at play. Well, that's about a 5% chance that that could happen, and if we start to see strong swarm activity, that percentage creeps up. But the significance of the fact that an earthquake, this notable, struck directly this location, which is so in the public zeitgeist right now with everything that's happening, and you have the longest total solar eclipse of the entire 21st century passing directly through Luxor to the south, having maximum totality of like 6 minutes, exactly next year, August 2nd, 2027, is remarkable. So reporting on what's happening with this earthquake, not only the scientific data, but also some of the larger energy implications that we're seeing here. Hello and welcome, I'm your host Stefan Burns. So here's the 5.46 Suez Canal. USGS has this as a magnitude 5. The Egyptians have it as a magnitude 5.46, and they do have a good seismic network across that area. You have the African plate subducting underneath the Eurasian plate, and the Middle Eastern plate basically got caught in between. Well, you have this Sinai microplate here. And here you have active continental rifting. So you have the crust splitting apart. Of course, you also have that down through the eastern part of Africa. So the East African Rift Valley with the African super plume, this really deep mantle plume, rifting all this apart. So we see how that naturally carries forward into this region where then you get direct subduction of Africa under Italy. So these are very closely connected together. And well, just on the 31st of July, we had the earthquake that struck Campi Flegrei. So here it is, 4.7, strongest in recorded modern history for an earthquake to strike. And it was just a big, fast jolt. We can look at that right here. Really just immediately just shook and caused a lot of damage because there's a lot of old buildings there that have been hit by multiple magnitude 4s in the past. And so this was just, a few days prior on the 31st of July, basically supervolcano saying, hey, I'm awake. Better hope I don't erupt. You also have here in the Aegean a sleeping giant because we had a huge amount of earthquake activity, tens of thousands of earthquakes, a whole laundry list mid-magnitude 5s. In the Aegean near Santorini, which they found out, that was last year, January, February 2025, they found out that was a result of a super deep magmatic dike injection. So just basically a huge amount of magma coming up closer to the surface. So we have some really big systems in play here. And thankfully a 5.46 is not like the end of the world, especially because it wasn't directly, for example, under Cairo or Alexandria. It was close by though. It's at this geopolitical choke point, which 12% of commerce, global commerce, moves through. And so if you were to effectively knock these three out simultaneously, things get really wild. They're already controlling this end now too in certain aspects, which affects, of course, the flow of stuff through the Suez Canal. But if you get all three of these shut down for geopolitical and maybe seismic reasons, I mean, we don't know. This appears to be related to the solar storm impact that we are in right now. I can show you that here. Here's our real-time solar wind. And this has triggered thus far a G2 minus geomagnetic storm. So here's our coronal mass ejection impact. Magnetic field strength goes up of the solar wind. Same with the density, the velocity, temperature, and here we had this period of geomagnetic storming at a minor to moderate level. Now it's flipping back into configuration. And so we are going to have an increase in geomagnetic activity going forward, this being the first notable earthquake to occur during this geomagnetic storm, which I forecast May 27th, 2026. I put out forecasts for there to be notable solar activity, space weather at the end of July, beginning of August because of planetary geometry. And so this is the other factor to be mindful of. Here we see Jupiter. Jupiter after a superior conjunction, a cazimi, and that was on the 29th of July. See how Campy-Flegrei happened 2 days later. This has now happened 2 days after that. It went cazimi on the 29th, and that's when we had the solar activity. A comet flew into the sun. It then had this solar storm eruption, and now we are being impacted by that. Here we see that sun grazer, now diver comet, and then basically right after we get the solar storm to launch out, a little bit of a delay, that's impacting us right now. A Jupiter cazimi is a very specific point in the sky. We notice that Jupiter is a constellation of Cancer. So this is the big energy focus right here. It's really actually almost like in this star basket right there. Cancer is flowing right in like this. That is the Jupiter cazimi. If we go next year to 2027, we get to August 2nd right here, you notice that the sun is basically in the same position because it's only 3 days later, but this is next year. Jupiter now is in alignment with the constellation of Leo conjunct Regulus with Ceres dwarf planet in the asteroid belt also conjunct this alignment. So there's a lot of really key synchronicity here showing that what just occurred 3 days ago is very much related to what's happening next year. And now, of course, we are seeing this earthquake strike in Egypt directly north, just by a few hundred kilometers, if that, of the eclipse path for next year, which we can see this very clearly right here. Here's our eclipse path, and we see this going straight through the Strait of Gibraltar, okay? So we touch Spain again here. We have this total solar eclipse right now going through Spain, right? Here's the one that's cutting through right here. And we have this alignment now between Egypt, Italy, and Spain. Spain can get magnitude 7 earthquakes. So we could be looking, Portugal has a history of magnitude 8s. We could be looking at a big seismic event for Spain as well in this forecast. But this total solar eclipse there, cutting only through the islands of Spain, not touching France or Portugal, direct incision through Spain, and then cutting up, hits Iceland a little bit, indicating rifting activity, also Greenland, and then going to Russia. And well, if we go back here, we have had some notable activity on rift centers. So for example, also here, magnitude 5.1 that struck Mexico in the Gulf of Baja, where you have not only transform junctions, but you're starting to get some rifting. So this is starting to move apart too. Other side of the world, actually fairly close to being antipodal to it. Antipode for California is more down here. So Baja would move it up just slightly to the north. So we're seeing a very clear story here of energy that's affecting Europe, Africa. Spain is in the crosshairs. Italy is very active, and clearly Greece and overall the Middle East are very implicated for the next probably about a year or two. The effects of this last a couple of years. I mean, if we go back to our solar system model here, the key thing to know is that we had this Saturn-Neptune conjunctions here in February 20th, 21st, the time range of 2026 in the constellation of Pisces. Pisces represents the ocean. Neptune is representative of oil, and Saturn is representative of blocks and limits. So we've had this perfect archetypal expression of the constellation of Pisces, Neptune, Saturn, signifying exactly what's happening right now with the closes of the Strait of Hormuz and the Bab el-Mandeb. Like the fact that they are closed down is perfectly illustrated by the archetypal signification of the planets occurring 8 days before the war broke out. Here's some of the shaking of this earthquake. And you'll notice some interesting things. And let me turn the volume down here. But the way it moves, some of it is camera effects, but you can see how just the building simply just detaches from the ground because of the resonant frequency and just starts to shake. So you start to get a magnitude 6 earthquake to hit, you could have whole blocks could come down with a mid-magnitude 6 perhaps. So this is a very serious situation. I wanted to bring this to your attention. What we discover also is that we have the planet Uranus here in the constellation of Taurus, which is the fixed Earth. So the planet of change, disruption, and genius is in Taurus. So there is a greater plan to all of this. We may not fully understand it, but it's going to be pretty significant and chaotic at first glance, but the order fundamentally will make sense later on. Uranus being the original proto-sky god that gave order to the Earth and, of the heavens. Conjunct the Pleiades star cluster, the closest interstellar cluster to us at 444 light years away approximately. So, these sort of genius abilities to forecast and see into the beautiful meaning of these events is really confirmation that there is something here and that heaven and cosmos and God are directly speaking to us through the events that are reflected in our reality collectively. So I will continue to keep you up to date on all this and more. I've been your host, Stefan Burns, geologist, geophysicist, space weather guy. Please smash that thumbs up button to help the channel grow. Subscribe to stay up to date. I release videos almost daily. Thank you all so much. God bless, and I wish you all a great day.